Hello, everyone. Welcome to Soho's Penning the Past series. I'm Dean Glass, and I'm so glad you're here with us today as we continue our journey through San Diego's layered and often surprising history. This month, we're exploring a transformative force in our region's development, San Diego's trolley system. From horse-drawn streetcars to electric marvels, these trolleys crisscross the city and help shape the neighborhoods we know today. We're honored to be joined by historian and archaeologist Douglas W. Mengers, whose deep knowledge of Southern California's infrastructure and growth brings this fascinating era to life. Doug meets the Secretary of the Interior's professional standards for archaeology, history, and architectural history, holds a GIS certificate in cultural resource documentation, and has authored several works on San Diego's transit history. His research offers valuable insight into how transportation shaped our city's development. Today, Doug will take us from the first trolley in 1886 through the rise and fall of San Diego's electric railway, showing how visionary investors like John D. Spreckels used public transportation to build entire communities, including North Park, Normal Heights, and Mission Beach. Please put any questions in the chat and we'll address them at the end of the program. And now, please join me in welcoming Douglas W. Mengers.
Thank you, Dean. And thank you everyone for joining us today. Just a quick check, can we see my share screen here?
I can see it. Are you seeing it?
Wonderful. Okay, then let's go ahead and get started. So a little bit about me first. All those initials behind my name really just means that I like school a lot. That I am currently, and have been for about 15 years now, the Director of Cultural Resources for Pangus. We're a small woman-owned environmental consulting firm based in Carlsbad. And so I am an archaeologist and historian and architectural historian. And so because of this work that I've been doing, especially on the trolleys, we tend to get called out whenever either the city or SDG&E finds or expects to find any streetcar rail that's still buried under the city streets. So the first thing I wanted to share with you is this story map. One of our GIS interns, Rhiannon and Killian, put together about the streetcars that we're going to see today. So the story map is an interactive website that was created using GIS software that lets you see where all the routes went at different times, along with photos and links for more information. So this is a free website anyone can visit, and I'll leave this information up on the last slide of how to access this. So one more thing before we get started. If you're interested in getting any high resolution photos of anything that I'm showing today or that's in my book, I can help you track those down. For the presentation, just send me an email on which slide or subject that you're interested in, and I'll get back to you. In the book, which is shown here, the photo source is listed at the end of each caption, those letters and initials there. Most of the photos are held by the San Diego History Center Archive, which is next door to the Model Railroad Museum in Balboa Park, the San Diego Electric Railway Association in National City, and the Pacific Southwest Railway Museum out in Campo. So here's a brief view of what we're going to cover today. We'll start by looking at what came before the San Diego Electric Railway, including the horse-drawn and the early electric and the cable cars. And then we'll cover nearly 60 years of the San Diego Electric Railway. And we should have plenty of time for Q&A at the end if you want to ask about anything not covered here. So let's start off by covering that pre-San Diego Electric Railway era, which covers the horse-drawn, the early electric, and the cable cars in the 1870s and 1880s. So the start of public transportation in San Diego was the San Diego Streetcar Company. Elisha Babcock and Hampton Story bought the Coronado Peninsula and began developing it in 1886. They started by building a pretty famous hotel that you might have heard about, seen in the photo here, and a ferry to get there from downtown San Diego. But the ferry stopped on the bay side of Coronado, and the hotel was on the ocean side. So they laid narrow rail across the Coronado Peninsula and ran simple horse-drawn streetcars in between. The first day of service was July 3rd, 1886. So we're coming up on an anniversary. I think 139, if my math's right. Early structures associated with the streetcar company included this horse barn that you see in the photo here, which was located near where today's ferry landing is on the bay side. The other component of the San Diego Streetcar Company was in downtown San Diego. Horse-drawn lines ran from the ferry landing and the Pacific Coast Steamship Wharf at the foot of Fifth Avenue, near today's Convention Center. This is before the Transcontinental Railroad connection to San Diego, so most people still arrived at this time by steamship. This photo is from a little bit later at about 1890. And note that light pole that's just above the trolley or the streetcar there. Those carbon arc lights were installed in the early 1880s, one of the first street lights in San Diego. So this area right now is probably under the gas lamp trolley station at Fifth Avenue, right near Harbor Drive or K Street. So once electricity arrived in San Diego became a leader in experimental electric transit. The first successful electric trolley in the Western US was the ERT, or Electric Rapid Transit, started by local businessman George Copeland in November of 1887. It ran from that wharf that we saw in the last photo up to Old Town, and later expanded into Bankers Hill on the west side of Balboa Park. This photo is from somewhere in Bankers Hill at that time. And note that pole on the top of the trolley and the wires hanging down. This might be a good chance to talk about the difference between streetcars and trolleys. A lot of times those terms are interchanged. A trolley is named that because on the top of this pole that you see coming out of the top of the car is a wire that then runs up to the electrical lines that run down the side of the street. And what connects the wire off the car to the wires across the poles is something that looks kind of like a roller skate and is called a trolley. So it rolls on wheels along those wires. And so that trolley eventually became just the common name for these kinds of electrical powered vehicles. A streetcar is a more generic term and refers to any power source. So cable cars, horse-drawn, or electric, those are all referred to as streetcars. So while we're covering streetcars in this, most of the rest of the presentation is going to specifically cover trolleys because that's what wound up being the most popular. But ERT was short-lived. Maintenance was high, partly because kids like to throw rocks at the wires to watch them spark, leading to a lot of extra problems. And they lost a lawsuit to San Diego Gas and Electric about pole heights and sharing space. And so ERT shut down in 1889. Copeland, though, the founder, still had the franchise and decided to start again using different technology. He organized the San Diego Cable Railway, which was only the fourth cable system in the West, behind San Francisco, Oakland, and Los Angeles. And he built a beautiful brick powerhouse shown here in Bankers Hill at the midpoint of the line. The cars shown here were designed by Chief Engineer Frank Van Vleck. You can see him here on the far left of the photo with his knee up on the running board. And they were built by the Stockton Combine Harvester and Agricultural Works Company of Stockton, California. They had stained glass clerestory windows, which you can see on the top of the car here. They had push-button electric bells to signal stops. They were painted in maroon and gray with white roofs and gold lettering. And each of the cars was named. You can see the Los Penasquitos car here. The cars were operated by gripmen who used a lever to pull the grip to grip that continuously moving cable to pull the car along. It was a fairly prestigious job at the time and paid 18 cents an hour, although they had to provide their own gray wool uniforms, which you can see them wearing here in front of the cable car house. To boost ridership in less developed areas, transit companies often built amusement parks or other attractions at the end of a route. The San Diego Cable Railway constructed the Pavilion at the Bluffs, seen here, overlooking Mission Valley near today's Trolley Barn Park. An orchestra played in the pavilion on Sundays, and there were 5 acres of picnic and strolling grounds. Later, they added a merry-go-round and a shooting gallery. And the pavilion was designed by the same architect, William Sterling Hubbard, who designed the cable car house and who would later go on to work with Irving Gill on a lot of other important properties in San Diego. But the California National Bank, which was funding the San Diego Cable Railway, collapsed in November of 1891 due to mismanagement and embezzlement. The cable cars still continued to run off and on for about a year, but were finally shut down in October of 1892. A Cincinnati businessman bought the remainder of the system and converted everything, including the cars, to electric, operating as the Citizens Traction Company in 1896. But again, finances were a problem, and the line shut down by February of 1898. So the next phase, as you can see, this was a time of many small streetcar startups using different technologies, but all without the long-term financing to get over that hump and build a lasting system, until John D. Spreckels arrived on the scene. Spreckels' father was head of a shipping and sugar empire based in San Francisco, but operating across the Pacific. Spreckels arrived in San Diego on a yachting trip in 1887 at the height of the land boom. He saw a lot of opportunity in the growing town, and the town council saw a lot of opportunity in his wealth. They immediately offered him a franchise to build a coaling wharf, seen here in this photo in about 1897, which was a great improvement over the previous system of small tenders that had to be rowed out to larger ships. This photo was interesting for historians like me. It was undated, but if you look in the bottom left, you can see the American flags as part of this mustering activity. And based on the number of stars on that flags, we were able to pin it down to about 1897. Back in those days, the flag changed a lot more frequently than it has lately. So the number of stars changed pretty often. So within a couple of years, Spreckels and his brother Adolf had bought out the Hotel Del, the Coronado Beach Railroad, which is seen here in 1897, with the boathouse and the bathhouse, and the Coronado Ferry. Spreckels felt that for his investments to return a good profit, San Diego would need to grow. And for San Diego to grow, it needed a steady water supply. So he also invested in Babcock's Otay Water Company, which built several dams in the backcountry around this time. He felt it also needed reliable transportation from the suburbs sprouting up around Balboa Park into downtown. To this effect, he incorporated the San Diego Electric Railway on November 30th, 1891, with himself as director, his brother Adolf as president, and Elisha Babcock as the vice president. Within a couple of months, he started to consolidate the other transportation companies that he owned and purchasing others. This is a photo of their first logo, the San Diego Railway Company, Electric Railway Company. In early 1892, SDERY began to convert all of that acquired rail to a common gauge and add passing track in downtown. They also began to electrify the steam and horse car routes that they had picked up. Shown here is a horse-drawn tower car from the 1890s that was used to install and repair overhead wires. That platform on the back can be cranked up and raised up so that workers can reach the tops of the poles where the wires are connected. I believe this photo is from somewhere in Hillcrest, but could be Golden Hill. To power that whole system, the San Diego Electric Railway built a powerhouse in 1892 at the corner of Kettner Street and Broadway. The 125-foot smokestack is visible in the background in this 1900 photo. Inside, a 300 horsepower steam engine drove two 100 kilowatt generators. Additional machinery was added in 1893 and again in 1896 as demand increased. And this building was sold to San Diego Gas and Electric in 1921, and the facade still remains today as part of the Electra condominium tower. Next door to the power plant, Babcock's son built Los Baños in 1897, a luxury bathhouse. Steam from the power plant, note that's the same smokestack in the background that we saw in the previous photo, heated the saltwater pools. Other amenities included locker rooms and showers, slides, diving boards, and rings. And this building was also designed by Hebert and Gill architects. And unfortunately, it is no longer there. So passenger service was inaugurated on September 21st, 1892. Rolling stock included a pair of these double-decker cars, seen here with a VIP run, including Alonzo Horton and Elisha Babcock, although I haven't been able to pick them out in the photo. The cars were painted yellow with gold leaf and brown stenciling. So far, the building in the background here is the first one that still exists. This is currently the Barley Mash restaurant that's at the northwest corner of 5th and Market in the gas lamp. The other 6 initial cars were single deck. Unlike earlier trolleys, the San Diego Electric Railway stock could operate in reverse, meaning that turntables weren't needed at the end of each line. This 1895 photo shows a car on the ferry line, which connected the Coronado Ferry Depot with the Southern California Railroad Depot, today's Santa Fe Depot. After the turn of the century, San Diego Electric Railway grew with San Diego. This began with expansion into suburban neighborhoods, including Mission Hills, North Park, and City Heights. With expanded service came the need for new cars. The California cars, like the ones seen here on Broadway in 1905, were based on the design of the remodeled cable cars. Part of the suburban expansion came through the acquisition and conversion of failed steam lines and interurban electric lines. One of these was the South Park and East Side Railway, started in 1906, but bought out by the San Diego Electric Railway in 1909. Seen here is the South Park and East Side car barn on 30th Street in about 1906. You can still see remnants of this system at the Station Tavern in South Park. If you've been there to eat, you'll notice that aside from having a lot of trolley paraphernalia in there, the shape of that lot is really odd, with a diagonal that cuts away from 30th Street. And the reason for that is because the former rail line came through this car barn at that location. This also included the National City and Otay Railroad, the Mexico and San Diego Railway serving Imperial Beach, and the Point Loma Railroad, seen here in downtown San Diego about 1910. All of these were brought into the San Diego Electric Railway system at different paces, so some of the original livery, meaning the paint job on the cars, stayed longer, while some of it changed immediately. So we can see here, this is still marked as the Point Loma Railroad Company, but it was already operating as part of the San Diego Electric Railway system at that time. So, exposition and apogee, the 1910s and 1920s. To feed the expanding system, San Diego Electric Railway upgraded a lot of facilities in the 1910s. This included that powerhouse at Kettner and Broadway that we saw earlier, pictured here just after completion in 1911. The portion with the curved glass in the front here still remains as part of that condominium tower down on Broadway. The next year, they opened a new car house and shops at 15th and Imperial. And in 1913, they built a new car barn on Adams Avenue, and that's where the Trolley Barn Park name comes from. So up to 1912, all of the San Diego Electric Railway cars had been built in their own in the San Diego Electric Railway shops, but some of those were nearing 20 years of service. And with all of the advances in trolley car technology, San Diego Electric Railway decided to discontinue their car building program, and they ordered 24 new cars from the St. Louis Car Company. These were known as Class 1 cars, seen here on Broadway in 1913. Note that #1 sign above the door on the roof. Around this time is when San Diego Electric Railway began numbering their routes. And these still follow the bus routes that came later follow these same numbers. So that #1 that you see on there is about where the #1 bus runs today. The Panama, California Exposition, celebrating the opening of the Panama Canal, opened in Balboa Park on January 1st, 1915. It ran for 2 years and had 3.7 million visitors. Not bad for a city with a population of 50,000 at the time. The San Diego Electric Railway ran a new line up Park Boulevard with a colonnaded terminal about where the fountain is now in front of the Nat. To serve all of those World's Fair goers, 76 new cars were bought, known as Expo or Class 2 cars, or sorry, Class 2 cars. They seated 52 to the Class 1's 40. One of the new cars is seen here at the Expo Terminal in 1923. San Diego Electric Railway had financial difficulties in the late 1910s, partly to do with funds that were diverted to Spreckels' San Diego and Arizona Railway, the Impossible Railroad. They attempted to raise fares from a nickel, and the city petitioned the California Railroad Commission in complaint. They settled on a zone fare system and also recommended smaller, safer cars. In response, San Diego Electric Railway ordered 25 Bernie safety cars from the American Car Company, which arrived in 1920 and 1922. The first of these, car 301, you can see here, leaving the 15th and Imperial Car House on its inaugural run in 1920. And remember this car. We'll see this a little bit later. For years, Spreckels had been grooming his son Klaus to take over the organization. He was promoted to general manager in 1922, and he immediately conducted a full system inspection. What he found was, quote, a broken up play toy of old wiring, bumpy rail, and an uncomfortable riding experience. So in March of 1923, he announced a $2.5 million upgrade program. Old wooden ties throughout the system were pulled up and replaced with steel or concrete. Above, you can see part of that process happening on Indiana Street in 1924. And here is Broadway looking towards downtown from Golden Hill in 1924, from about where the I-5 overpass is now. The apartment building on the right is still there, that 3-4-story building. But not much else. The new upgrades also included new wiring throughout the system and 50 new modern trolley cars with steel construction and closed bodies. The other main upgrade of the period was a new beach line. A new viaduct was built to cross the freight lines near the MCRD entrance south of Old Town. And from there, the line ran across the mud flats on the south side of Mission Bay, as seen here during construction in 1924. A branch line ran to Ocean Beach, and the main line followed the tracks of the Bay Shore Railroad, which Spreckels had bought in 1923. And that bridge you can see in the back right of this photo, heading over towards today's Mission Beach. After crossing the mouth of Mission Bay, that beach line ran along Mission Beach to the new Mission Beach Amusement Park, later renamed Belmont Park, shown here on opening day on July 4th, 1925. To promote the park, you could buy a package deal for 75 cents that included trolley fare from downtown, a swimsuit rental, a towel and a locker, and park entrance and a sack lunch, all for 75 cents. Not sure about the swimsuit rental these days, but we are coming up on the big anniversary of Belmont Park. North of Mission Beach, the line ran on the abandoned Los Angeles and San Diego Beach Railroad grade. A new Mission Revival style station was built at La Jolla Hermosa near today's Bird Rock. Seen here in 1927, it still stands, but is now actually a church. It's the home of La Jolla United Methodist. And it is completely filled in with homes surrounding here. But that railroad grade that the trolley ran on is now a hiking and walking trail. So you can follow that old path. And this terminal station, surrounded by a turnaround loop, was built at Fay and Prospect Streets in La Jolla. A Bernie car is seen here on the loop next to the station on the right. With the completion of the beach line, San Diego Electric Railway reached its maximum extent, the equivalent of 107 single-track miles. You could ride from downtown San Diego to La Jolla in about 45 minutes, which I challenge you to do today at almost any time of the day, even in your own personal vehicle, right? So here are some images of tokens and passes that were used on the San Diego Electric Railway system. The SDERA Museum in National City has many of these on display. Tokens came in a variety of materials, including nickel and aluminum. This pass was good for a week, for week 6 of the year. They were introduced in 1923 and were good across all zones. So let's talk about the decline and resurgence through the 1930s and 1940s. The party didn't last long. Klaus was forced out in 1925, and John D. Spreckels passed away in June of 1926. He had an amazing view of the growth of San Diego. This picture here shows a horse-drawn streetcar on Fifth Avenue, or Fifth Street at the time, in 1887, the year Spreckels arrived to a bankrupt town of population 16,000. Whereas this photo is the same location just before Spreckels passed away, showing the paved streets, electricity, and automobiles of a bustling city with a population of 135,000. After Spreckels passed, new management took over the San Diego Electric Railway and began liquidating assets, including Belmont Park, the newspapers, and the just completed Spreckels building on Broadway. Autobuses also changed the San Diego Electric Railway system. While introduced in the 1920s, their use expanded through the 1930s, replacing some of the lesser used routes. The first trolley route to be totally replaced by buses was Route 8 from downtown to Old Town, seen here at Horton Plaza on its first day of service on May 1st, 1924. Buses were becoming popular across the country, and in response, a group of electric railway managers and streetcar manufacturers met to design a more modern car to compete with those buses. The result was the President's Conference Committee, or PCC car. San Diego bought 28 of these, the first in the Western US, and were put into service starting in 1937 in the new cream and green paint scheme. Seen here is one of these PCC cars in Mission Hills. And these cars were used across the country. So we're on a lot of different systems, but San Diego's was the first in the West. By late 1930s, only 9 lines remained. The rest had all been converted to buses. But the US entry into World War II changed that. With defense buildup in San Diego, there was an immediate need for increased public transit. All older mothballed cars were painted that cream and green livery and returned to service, like the 1912 Class 1 cars shown here. Note that parts plant sign just below the number 7 in the front window, if you can see it. That refers to the Consolidated Aircraft Factory in Middletown. Additional cars were obtained from other trolley systems across the US, including Salt Lake City's Utah Light and Traction Company, Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, and New York City's Third Avenue Railway System, or TARS, T-A-R-S. The TARS cars, like the one shown here on Broadway, were dilapidated wooden cars that were designed for subways, but they got the job done. You can see one of the PCC cars behind it in the middle of the photo here. And this is one of my favorite photos I came across during this research. It's just such an amazing street scene of 1940s San Diego. Ridership increased 6-fold during the war, primarily on the trolleys, but also with an expanding fleet of buses. New routes were added to service neighborhoods that sprang up nearly overnight, such as Linda Vista. The photo above is of Horton Plaza in 1943. And so you've got a mix. There's one of those TARS cars in the front, a PCC car at the left edge of the photo, and some new autobuses along the sidewalk in the back. But trolley ridership dropped significantly after the war, and most of the older cars were retired. A system-wide transit survey recommends ceasing operation on 1/3 of San Diego Electric Railway's trackage. Buses were simply more economic and flexible in the face of shifting population centers. Most routes were shut down in 1946 and 1947, including Route 4 on Imperial Avenue, shown here. Note the round trip train fare on that billboard on the right-hand side, $2.75 to Los Angeles and back. They have 4 daily trips, which I don't know if they hit today. From mid-1947 on, the only electric streetcar lines that were still in operation were on the most heavily traveled routes. So Route 2, Broadway and Brooklyn Heights, Route 7, East San Diego, and Route 11, Adams Avenue. And they were running only the Class 5 cars, which were introduced to replace the burning cars, and the PCC cars. The final run for each of these lines was early in the morning on April 24th, 1949. Seen above is the final run of Route 7 with VIPs aboard. Halfway through the run, San Diego Electric Railway's most senior operator, Mr. Holmquist, who you can see in the photo on the right, with 42 years of service as an operator, took over to bring the car into the Adams Avenue car house. San Diego became the first major city in the Western US to convert to all bus operation. So San Diego has always led on experimental transit and new transit ideas. So there are several archives of documents and photos of the San Diego streetcar system, as well as a few places you can view some of the original cars in case you want to learn more. The burning car shown above in this photo was originally car number 301 that we saw in the earlier photo. It was later sold to the Sacramento Northern Railroad, where it was repainted, renumbered, and operated in Chico, Marysville, and Sacramento until 1947. It's currently being restored at the Western Railway Museum up in Suisun City in the Delta. So this car, after it was retired in 47, it went to that museum, and it has been used on their tracks since for excursion railroads. So when I went to visit, it was currently being rehabbed, but this car has now operated for longer at the Railroad Museum than it ever operated in either San Diego or Sacramento. Other places that you can go locally and see some of the old San Diego cars. Of course, the San Diego Electric Railway Association in National City. They have quite a few there, along with a lot of other history about the system. The Pacific Southwest Railway Museum in Campo has some of the cars. They also have the largest archive of photographs and documents from the San Diego Electric Railway. The Southern California Railway Museum up in Paris also has an excursion railroad, so you can ride on some cars up there. I believe what they have up there now are some of the early 1980s San Diego trolley cars. And then the Western Railway Museum in Suisun City, where this photo was taken, they have several San Diego cars up there in different states of repair, including some of the original PCC cars and even one of the TARS cars that was built in 1904. And then the Silver Line on San Diego's modern trolley system are using restored PCC cars. And you can go ride those. They only operate on certain holidays. If you hop on the MTS website, you can see when those holidays are. The two that are coming up the soonest, though, are July 4th, although that's a short day run because of the Padres game, I think, that's happening that day. And then on Saturday, July 19th. And they mostly run that downtown loop. So those are pretty neat. So if you want to learn more, my book, Images of Rail San Diego Trolleys, has a ton of photos. What I tried to do with today's presentation was use photos that didn't make it in the book. So just because you've seen today's presentation, there's a whole ton of extra new stuff in that book that you wouldn't have seen, and a lot more research and details. You can pick that book up at the Marston House Museum shop. My understanding is they're almost sold out, but I'll be dropping off some more copies over there. And if you are a Soho member, I believe there's a member discount. If you can't make it out there, I believe the Model Railroad Museum at Balboa Park has copies, along with the SDERA Museum down in National City. I've also seen it on the shelves at La Playa Books in Point Loma, some local Barnes & Noble, and I think even CVS, or of course online. And if you are interested and you want a signed copy, I'll try to get over to Marston House. Otherwise, drop me a line. I'd be glad to do that if anyone's interested. And as I mentioned, here's how to get to the story map if you're interested. If you don't have a chance to jot down the link here, then if you simply do a Google search on boom to burbs, this will pop up right near the top. I tested it again this morning, and you'll see it under the Pangas link, my company, and that logo is in the top right, in case you're wondering the spelling on that. So I think we'll go ahead and leave this up here in case anyone is interested. That's all we have, Dean. I turn it back over to you in case we have any questions.
All right. Thanks, Doug. That was really good. I really enjoyed that. A lot of great photos, too. Let's get to some questions here. Excuse me. Which neighborhood's development was most dramatically shaped by the trolley system, in your opinion, and why?
Off the top of my head, I'd probably have to say North Park, really just because that had. So in 1907, and there's a lot more photos of this on in my book. By that time, the trolley had already, Hillcrest and Golden Hill and South Park had really already existed as neighborhoods before this expansion. So it's hard to link them so closely. But in 1907, they cut through the mesa and really graded University Avenue all the way down to Boundary, and did the same thing on Adams Avenue all the way down to Boundary. And right down the middle of that, when it was still a dirt road, they put the trolley tracks. They ran it all the way down to, and then at 30th is where that neighborhood really popped up. So North Park, especially at 30th and University, with the extension of that trolley through there, it really exploded over the next decade. And so I think that, without that trolley line going down University, I don't think North Park would look like it does today. It wouldn't have, I don't think it would have expanded the way it did. Possibly, or if it did, it would have run up 30th and not out University. And so it would have been a much different organization and different flavor. So, yeah.
Were there any particularly surprising or lesser known stories you uncovered during your research that didn't make it into your book?
Yeah, there's a couple. So there's a little bit in the book. When I talked about the collapse of the cable car company, I barely went into it today. I just mentioned that the bank that was funding the effort had collapsed. Well, due to mismanagement and embezzlement. That was an absolutely fascinating story. I have a little bit more in the book, but most of it didn't make it in there. The um, the embezzlement was amazing. The bank just got looted by the I believe it was the vice president and the branch manager. They they and the two of them, when it was discovered, the vice president, I believe it was already in Europe and never came back. And there were stories in the newspaper for years about spotting this guy. And so it was a huge story, and not just in San Diego, but um, whereas I believe it was the branch manager actually committed suicide in the Brewster Hotel in downtown San Diego. And so it was a huge local story, a huge to-do. And I hadn't heard anything about that before starting research for this. So that was neat. Um, The other one really is more about the architecture. William Sterling Hebbard, who was the architect that was hired by the cable car company to design the car house, he also designed a mansion for the bank owner. He designed a house for staff of the railroad, and so he had a lot of stuff here. He was San Diego's first master architect. The property that he's probably most known for that's still around is the Ramona Town Hall, which is listed on the National Register. And it was neat because most architects in the West at that time were self-taught. And yet Hebert had gone to school back east, was a professional architect, and had been brought out by his friend Van Vleck, who had worked on the Los Angeles Railway before. So uh, it's a neat early history into San Diego's early architecture. And so that was something that really hasn't been written about a lot. Hebbard's later partner, Irving Gill, has had a resurgence in later years, but there still hasn't been a whole lot written about Hebbard himself. So.
Okay, if you could ride any segment of the old San Diego Electric Railway again, which route would you choose and why?
I'm still, well, the electric boy. Um,
I guess it could be any of them.
if it's any, I'd really love to ride that old cable car. It's just, it's so. I lived in San Francisco for a lot of years, and even being a historian, there's just no love given to the other cable systems aside from San Francisco's, right? And so I would love to be able to ride that. Um, at the near the midpoint, and to see that old cable car building. Um, if it's one of the electrics, I also lived in the Golden Hill area for a long time, and that's such a neat neighborhood that has changed so much over time, and yet it really is the home to the um, early routes, and so riding one of those early routes through Golden Hill, I think would be super cool. Seeing the Montezuma house out there, seeing those old neighborhoods as they were around 1905 or 1910, I think would just be amazing. So.
Oh, yeah. Okay, well, I guess that's it for the questions. Thank you, Doug, for that captivating look at San Diego's trolley past. It's incredible to see how much our city's character and shape has been influenced by streetcar lines and how those choices still echo in our neighborhoods today. Excuse me. And thank you to everyone who joined us for this edition of Penning the Past. If you missed part of today's program or want to share it with others, the recording will soon be available on the Soho San Diego YouTube channel, along with all of our past presentations. We hope you'll join us again next month as we continue exploring the people, places, and innovations that shaped our region. On July 12th, we'll be joined by Gary Fogel for the Torrey Pines Glider Port and Wind and Wings, the history of soaring in San Diego. Until then, don't forget to visit sohosandiego.org to stay up to date on all of our events, tours, and preservation efforts. Stay curious, and thank you for supporting Soho. All right. Thank you, Doug, for that great lecture. Appreciated it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, and thanks for joining us.
Everybody, have a good day.